Hello, YouTube.
Greetings. You're live.
You're live.
If
I'm
it,
alive.
what if it comes up and says you're dead?
Well,
That
then it's
sounds
time to call it a day.
that sounds like a horror movie waiting to be made.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't watch scary
No,
movies
it's a
as a
line.
rule.
It's a line
So
from
from a movie I haven't seen, probably.
I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, that's not one that I've seen.
I haven't either, but
Okay.
I've seen that scene
Yeah.
with Drew Barrymore. The
Aha.
5 seconds that she's in that movie. She's the first one to die. Spoiler alert, it came out 30 years ago. Anyway, hello everyone.
Greetings.
We're not going to talk about scary movies because I don't like scary movies.
And she's not even black. That's
Whoa!
that's-
You're just
oh, that's like the horror movie trope, right? That's the joke is the black guy's always the first to die in the
yeah,
thing,
you
so-
know, I think it was the Wayans brothers that did
Yeah,
the
that's
scary movie, and
yeah.
they like leaned into that trope.
that's they
They
work that
definitely
trope.
leaned into that trope,
That's how it works. The brother's the first to go. You know, that's how it works.
and they had a token black friend that has to be funny and everything.
Right? Yeah.
Anyway, is this what you came for?
Yeah.
90s.
What did
scary
you come
movies?
for?
What did you come for?
Did you come? Are you here? Are you with us?
Are you with
'Cause,
us?
You know, are you listening?
Papa, can you hear me?
Are You Listening was a David Crowder album, I believe, if
There
I'm
you
not
go.
mistaken.
Anyway,
Or Can You Hear Us? Maybe that's it.
I do say
I'm losing my mind.
if you can see us,
I'm not used to wearing a tie.
I was
so
going to say if you can see us, then you can see that Rich is very fancy today.
very fancy.
If you can't see us, I'm going to tell you that Rich is very fancy today.
Yeah. It's
And I'm glad if you can't see us because
It's a
I
Saturday.
am not fancy.
It's a Saturday. We don't normally do this
this
on a
your typical
Saturday.
Saturday
You know, this
garb?
is my Saturday clothing. You know, but yeah, this is it's unusual for us to be on a Saturday. Got a funeral afterwards. In fact, just to mention to our dear friend and faithful listener Chuck, it's a memorial service for his parents, for his mom specifically, but for both of his parents today. And so, Chuck, our condolences. Our hearts go out to you and your family. So,
For sure. And I will refrain from making an eagle noise. But
Chuck would probably appreciate it if you did.
I think I did it last week
So,
for the Olympics,
yeah.
but I will refrain for now. But anyway, we are kind of, I don't want to say paused, but we're kind of in this little mini section that
Yeah,
we're going to
bit
be
of a
in
holding pattern.
for a few weeks here in Deuteronomy. And we kind of touched on it last week going into the idea of election.
Yeah.
And we kind of dove into that a little further this week.
Yeah, I think the title may have confused some folks as we're going through because we're using "Why Me" as the title for all
That
of
can
these
be taken a
for
few
about
different
5,
ways.
and rightly so. And in fact, this week our friend Smitty is going to be singing the old Chris Christopherson song. Easy for me to say. "Why Me," and it really does kind of capture the picture that we have in Deuteronomy 9, which is what springboarded us into this little mini series. As 3 times in 3 verses, Moses, by the Lord's inspiration, is telling Israel, you are not being chosen and blessed because of anything in you.
Mhm.
It's not because you're righteous. It's not because, of anything in you. It's because God is God. And he has a purpose beyond this. And he has chosen to set his affection on you. So then he's addressing that natural tendency that they had, that we as humans have, to think that there's somehow a connection, that if something goes well for us, that whether overtly or just sort of implicitly, we get this picture in our minds that it's because we did something good, right?
Right.
There's a reward, kind of a deal
Or
to it.
adversely something bad. and,
Exactly.
oh, God is punishing me. or,
Right,
you know.
right. So what sin is this?
I've fallen into that trap. For
And
sure.
we see that in the New Testament as well, when they come to Jesus and say, well, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And he's like, neither one, but so
Right.
that God's purpose could be carried out, so that God could be glorified in this moment with what's about to happen. Excuse me. And so as we are, I determined that I was not going to cough today. How did that work? And so
Lies.
we're not, so I haven't coughed yet, just a little clearing of the throat. So,
Teetering the line here.
we're parsing as we go. But as as we see that, we do in our limited understanding, in our finiteness, we focus down here. And so we think whatever is happening, and I think in some ways it's even more of a tendency in the Western mindset. eh, eh, My understanding, not having been in an Oriental Eastern type setting, um, my understanding of things is, as Americans, as Westerners, the nature of how we approach things, it has a lot to do with pulling yourself up by your
Mhm.
bootstraps, earning your way, and so on. And so that a lot of times can be a pervasive thought in our theology and how we look at God, rather than what God actually tells us.
Mm.
And so Moses is addressing that. And we've seen him, we saw this back in Numbers. We've seen it throughout this the early third or so of Deuteronomy, where he's dealing with the pendulum swing from the pride of thinking we're good to the fearfulness of thinking that we can't do this. And he's saying, get your eyes off of yourself. Either way, don't think more of yourself than you should. Don't think less of yourself than you should, because it's really not about you in the
Right.
first place. It's all about God's glory. It begins and ends there. And so as we were looking at this week's Why Me, and focusing on we kind of built around the hymn, or drew from the hymn, How Great Thou Art. The picture that we wanted to get is that God is bigger than we imagine. God is great, is vast, and he is supreme. So the supremacy and primacy of God in the vastness and greatness of who he is as a creator of all things is the foundation, in a sense, of his sovereignty.
Mm.
He made everything, he owns everything, he rules everything. So the focus in terms of election and understanding how this works together is that God, being God, has the right to do whatever he decides to do, because he is the creator, he's the owner, he's the ruler, he's the boss, the God of gods, King of kings, Lord of lords. He is the only one who can determine right, wrong, what I choose to do. Not only can no one thwart his plans, no one has the authority to question his judgments. So God alone has all authority, all sovereignty, and so we talked about the core reality as we were walking through this election thing, the governing reality that we learned the previous Sunday. This is the governing core reality for this whole mini series: is that living wholeheartedly for God is a response to his covenant love, not the reason for it. And as we break that down, what we saw this week, we took as our text Deuteronomy 10 verses 12 to 22. um, and what we see is that the sovereign God has the right to do as he pleases and to demand wholehearted devotion. So because God is God, and that's the point that Moses is making here, just to look at. I'll just read it. I won't read the whole thing, but now Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I'm giving you today for your own good. Not new, right? This is what he's been saying straight along. We see this in various forms. We see it in Deuteronomy 6, 5, to love the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole being, heart, soul, strength. And we see Micah 6, 8, walking with God. We see at the end of Ecclesiastes, walking with God. This is the whole thing. Surrender yourself to him, submit to him as God. And the theme that he keeps coming back to is we express that by being careful to keep all that he commands us. And notice also that he says the commands are not just for God's glory. They are, but they're for your own good.
Mhm.
God's glory ultimately is our highest good. That's a point that John Piper makes pretty specifically and extensively in his book Desiring God, and really in everything that he does in his ministry in proclaiming the supremacy of God, is that our joy, our highest joy, our deepest, greatest, most lasting pleasure is in him. Now, it's in glorifying God and enjoying him forever. That is the thing. We glorify him, as Piper would put it, by enjoying him forever, or as sort of the theme of desiring God, God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in him. So that's what he's saying here in those first couple of verses of today's text. But then he goes on, to the Lord your God, this is starting with verse 14. To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. Yet the Lord set his affection on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all the nations, as it is today. Circumcise your hearts, therefore, and do not be stiff-necked any longer. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. And he continues to go on and talk about the character of God. But the picture that Moses is giving them here, having already pointed out in chapter 9, God chose you because God chose you.
Mm-hmm.
God is doing a thing in judging the wickedness of the Canaanites. He's doing a thing in keeping his covenant promises to your ancestors. It's not because you deserve it.
Right.
You're a stiff-necked people. And then he goes on for most of 9 and into 10 to just point out to them, hey, remember when we got the 10 commandments and I was up on the mountain with the Lord and you heard the voice of God and you saw the fire on the mountain? Yeah, even then, at that moment, while that's going on, you're building an idol, right?
You done messed up.
And then he recounts and look at what you did at this place and what you did at this place. And you just kept making God angry with your disobedience, with your unfaithfulness, because you were not living wholeheartedly for him. Now, think about this. What is it that God is asking you to do? It's not some, jumping through a bunch of hoops, trying to do things to earn his favor. He has chosen you. And he's saying you need to live as if you have been chosen by God. You need to live for me wholeheartedly. Because God is the biggest, as VeggieTales would say. God is the biggest and he's on my side.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea how vast and great and powerful and sovereign this God is. And so when we begin to get a glimpse of the bigness of God, that was the focus as we looked at Deuteronomy 10, is the bigness, the indescribable greatness of who he is. Mm-hmm. He has the right, the authority to do whatever he wants, mm-hmm. and the power to back it up. Mm-hmm. And so when God says, live wholeheartedly for me, it's not optional, right? And we don't get to wrestle with, well, we did our best, or, God knows I'm trying. No, when God says this is what the expectation is, he has the right to demand that. So that was kind of the focus as we're working through this.
I was thinking about this because I don't think we can go through a podcast without me mentioning a TikTok video of some kind.
Oh, there you go.
There was a video I saw the other day, and this guy was basically saying, I'm going to butcher what he was actually saying here, but if you go out into the world somewhere and say the name of Jesus or say the name of God, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Whereas you can go out into the world and talk about Buddha or Muhammad or whoever, and people are like, yay, let's, mm-hmm. yeah. Jesus makes the world at large uncomfortable. Yeah. And to me, as that struck me like a lot, because yeah. I'm like, man, we were talking Gary talked last week about the persecuted church, and we don't deal with a lot of that here in America, but it's coming, I feel. Mm-hmm. And it's started in certain ways, but obviously I don't want to compare apples to oranges here as the horrid things that are happening in other parts of the world with Christians. Right. But there are signs of it here, and
it doesn't make it not persecution,
right?
But we can recognize there are degrees. There are big differences between the persecution that people face in some hostile countries, right, where it's illegal versus what we're dealing with now. That doesn't make it not persecution.
And I guess that kind of persecution, and obviously, there are other religions that people, frown upon, I guess, but Christianity, and specifically the name of God, the name of Jesus, makes so many people uncomfortable or angry and whatever. And that, to me, in a strange kind of woven way, just shows the power and the mightiness of God, because there are no other I'm using quotes here, gods
Right.
who cause that reaction across the globe.
Yeah, there's no reason to
Right.
fear those other gods.
Right.
So
So even if somebody doesn't want to admit that God is who he says he is,
Yeah.
they innately know, or they wouldn't be so upset about it.
right.
You wouldn't care. Oh yeah, you're whatever.
Someone, and I don't remember who it was, pointed out that that atheists are not angry about fairies or Santa
Right,
Claus
right.
or other things, or because they don't exist.
Right.
They're not angry about
Be
them.
careful, because I have an 8-year-old in the next room.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't mean,
No, you're fine, you're fine,
but whatever the example was,
Yeah.
they're
No, I
not
get
they're
it.
not upset by the existence of
Right.
whatever,
Right.
but they're angry about God,
Legit
They're
angry.
specifically about Jesus, because there is, no matter how much you want to say something doesn't exist, when it exists, it exists, right?
And I think it's in us.
So
as
ultimately, it
humans.
doesn't matter if you believe
Right.
in an ontological way. The reality of the essence of who God is does not require your belief
Right. And I
for
think
him to
even
be.
if you don't believe, it stirs something within you, because it's in us as human beings. We know,
Yeah.
even if you don't want to accept it or believe it. So
Right.
I maybe that's a roundabout way of saying things, but to me, hearing that this week and then thinking about what Gary said about the persecuted church last week, if you want to look at God's mightiness, just look at how people who want to say they don't believe, whatever, look how upset they get.
Right.
There's no other God, again, quotes, that gives that reaction across the world.
Yeah, there is an exclusivity in the Bible, that there is one God. There aren't many gods. And God will use that language in his
Right.
speaking, because that's how we talk. And so when we see the God of gods and so on, he's not saying there are other gods. He's saying there's supremacy of the one true living God. And because he is who he is, because he created all things. In the beginning, God created. And everything that exists because of him, through him, and holds together in him, in Christ specifically. And because of all that, it is uncomfortable, because if that God exists, who is supreme over all things, then he has the right to demand.
Right.
I don't want a God that demands.
You hear all the time, how could a loving God do that? How could well, because he's God.
Right. The better question is, how can a sovereign God do that?
Right.
Because he's sovereign, he can do what he wants.
Right.
And by definition, our understanding of what is right and wrong, what is moral and pure, comes from him. We'll get a little more into that next week as we talk about the holiness of God. But the holiness of God is bigger than the bigness of God in a sense. So as we're talking about who God is and how he elects his people, how does he choose? Why does he choose? Is it okay for him to choose? Why does this matter? And why is it right and good that he should do so? Because he is who he says, it's fitting for him to demand our wholehearted living, right? Because we belong to him. He created us for his purposes, not for our own. So when the creator says, this is what I want from you, then that's what you provide. If I'm the potter and I'm, making something, I'm making a lamp, that lamp is to lamp, right? That's what it's supposed to do.
Lamp.
Right.
Yeah.
So there isn't anything
Right.
else for it. Its purpose is defined and determined by the one who creates it and owns it and designed it to work a particular way.
I think that can be. This is where I
don't know how I went from potter to lamp, but whatever, you get it.
Potter can make a lamp, right?
Sure, why not?
I don't know. I can't even make a clay.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, I think this is something that I've struggled with in the past. If the creator makes all of us with a purpose, and that includes, like here in Deuteronomy, he wasn't doing this in this section for the Israelites. He was doing it, and so I think about people. I think the most obvious one to me in the Bible is Judas. So Judas was created, born, and this was his purpose.
Yes.
And
that's Jesus
hard.
Alludes to that when he
Right.
says, I've not lost any that you gave me except for the one who is determined to be this from the beginning.
And so there are other people throughout the history of the world that have been created for purposes specifically that aren't good for all intents and purposes. And that's hard to grasp. You know?
And that brings up the idea of double predestination. There are some what folks would call hardcore Calvinists or things like that take election a step further. Not that we can't take reality further than reality is. That's an illogical thing. But in talking about it, we have folks who would ascribe to what you might call double predestination, that not only does God determine whom he will save, but he predestines some to damnation. Right.
That's scary.
And then we get kind of freaked out by that. I think that is because of the things that you just said, both unnecessary for us to think about and important for us to come to terms with. If God does that, are we okay with it? Because ultimately that's the question of, are we submitting to him or not? If God does this thing that I don't think is possible, that it doesn't seem right in my mind, in my understanding, will I still trust in the Lord with all my heart and not lean on my own understanding, but in all my ways submit to him and trust him to straighten the paths? If I can do that in the areas that I don't understand, then I'm submitting to God. If I can only do that in the areas that I do understand, where it makes sense to me and it seems fair and just and right to me from my perspective, then am I actually submitting to God, or am I submitting to my own version of God, my own understanding? And I'm not suggesting, for those who are freaking out right now, I'm not suggesting double predestination. What I'm saying is it's really a matter of semantics, and it doesn't matter, because by definition, if he determines every person that's going to be saved, then just the converse of that, he created these other people without determining that they would be saved. So then those who would call that double predestination, they're right. Those who would not say that, they're also right. It doesn't really, ultimately, it's not the point.
I've had conversations about this, like, I guess it's not modern anymore, but everybody knows, Adolf Hitler, for example.
Yeah.
I know as a Christ follower that everything that God does is eventually for some good purpose.
Right. For his purpose.
Right.
For his glory and our ultimate good. Doesn't
Right.
mean in the moment, but yes.
So you look at, the Holocaust and you think, what could possibly good come of that? And then I have to sit there and think, I don't know. I don't know if one person from that survived the Holocaust, or maybe a soldier that was a part of it or something. Was it for that person? Was it for a group of people? Was it for us today looking back on it?
And probably all of those things, and 1,000
and
times
I'll never
over
know.
more.
So I have to be like, well, it's really not up to me to know.
Right.
And if Adolf Hitler was born specifically for this purpose, then God had to know Adolf Hitler would never come to God. And so it's all, you could get into a whole little mental rabbit hole with it, just driving yourself crazy with it. But
I think that's one of the other things that makes election difficult for us is we have a tendency to look at things through a specifically, and again, this may be more specific.
Sorry if I'm taking us off course.
No, I don't think you are. I think all of these things are related. And ultimately the reason we're talking about this election is because we do have such a hard time getting things to reconcile in our mind. How do we square that circle?
Or I think of like somebody like Charles Manson, who for years would say, if I got out of jail, I'd do the same thing I did again. But if Charles Manson, 5 minutes before his death, gave his life to Christ, that would have been cool. That's theoretically right. I don't think he did.
I mean, look at the thief on the cross, right?
I don't think Charles Manson did, based on what he was saying.
But there needs to be a repentance, and we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. But as we're talking about these things, there's so much, like you said, there's so much going on that God knows that we don't know, right? Was Hitler evil? Unquestionably, just unbelievably, unspeakably evil. Was the Holocaust an evil thing? Absolutely. There's no good in that evil.
Right.
You can go all the way back to the garden. Was the beginning of all sin? Hitler is because Adam and Eve ate that fruit. Is that evil? Well, absolutely. And so God then is glorified in condemning that. He's also glorified in redeeming those that he calls to himself. And so he's glorified in both things. It just, and again, I can't pretend to have even the slightest inkling of God's eternal purpose and his greatness beyond what he tells us. So we know that it's ultimately all things work together for the good for those that he has called, right? For those who belong to him, who he's chosen according to Ephesians before the creation of the world, for his people. Ultimately, all of this works together for the good. In some cases, that might be, to stick with Hitler and the Holocaust, do we have a better understanding of evil and how depraved humanity is because of that?
Or like 9/11.
Right.
You know, what good could come from that? You know, I think, but
we think in terms of individual good,
right.
And we think in terms of temporal good,
right.
rather than eternal principles. How is God glorified through the justice that comes to evil? How do we see a contrast between his holiness and our unholiness in the presence of sin? When we see that's why it always irked me so much when, and I think every student in school now reads Anne Frank's Diary of Anne Frank. And when she comes to the conclusion that, in spite of it all, I really believe people are basically good. Well, you got the exact opposite message of what you should be getting from this. The picture that the scripture makes very, very clear is people are not basically good.
I think we want to believe that.
We do, absolutely.
Especially when,
because that's the humanist mentality.
She was a child. I mean, kids want to believe that people are good and when they can trust them.
Sure, because there's an innocence to that. The innocence was stolen, and I'm not trying to put anything on her as an individual. I'm just saying that is our tendency, is to get the wrong message. So the more evil a thing is, the clearer it becomes that we are not like God, right? And then how does that come out? We'll see some of that next week, because like I said, next week we'll talk about the holiness of God, and we'll look at Isaiah 6 to get this picture. But what we want to get from this week in looking at the bigness of God, right? That he is just unfathomably great, so much more than we can imagine, so much bigger, so much just huge. I don't have words to express the greatness of God. And yet also that's always coupled in scripture with his moral uprightness, which is ultimately defined by him. He is the definition of righteousness. And so we determine what righteous morality is based on God's character. And then we see Moses here in chapter 10 pointing out in the portion following what I read, that God is the defender of the weak. He's lifting up those who are oppressed, and therefore his people are to do those same things. And we'll see that as Moses, gives the people the law from the Lord in chapter 12 and following. You're dealing with civic interaction, with personal interaction, with the how do you deal with each other as the people of God? How do you deal with foreigners? How do you deal with criminals? How do you do all these things? And all of it is to be governed by the character of God and according to his sovereign right to say, this is how you are to live. So we focus this week on his right to say that. Next week, as we look at his holiness, we'll talk about how we don't have the right to expect anything good from God. There's no way in our very best situation that we could say, oh, we deserve and God owes us. And we need to get that picture as well.
And I think so many of us do,
absolutely,
even not necessarily,
even if we don't consciously believe it,
even unconsciously, we're like, well, I deserve this,
right? Yeah, we
or
have
I don't deserve this, whatever.
Back to the why me question.
Right.
So there's the element of why me? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known?
Or why me?
But there's why am I going through this? Why I like you said, I don't deserve this. And my grandfather used to always say, do you really want what you deserve? Because what we all deserve is hell.
Right.
So if you get what you deserve, we have a problem.
Is a is God's grace. at this point.
Absolutely.
So,
It's his breath in our lungs, right?
all right.
So
We will stop there for today. But thank you guys for listening. And again, we're going to be in here, this little subsection, for a few more weeks. So hopefully you can join us either in person or online. And I think that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
I think we'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you later. Bye, YouTube.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Jack. Bye, Jack. Okay. If you need to get going.